Okay, Sharona's parents immigrated from Philadelphia to Israel in 1963, where she was born and raised a Sabra. After finishing her military service, she went to study Land of Israel Studies at the Beit Berl Teachers College. She received a BEd and her official tour guide certification from the Ministry of Tourism in 1995 and has been a tour guide ever since. Passionate lover of Israel, she specializes in history and archaeology. So welcome, Sharona.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. I'm going to mute everyone. If you're not speaking, please remain muted. If you have any questions, leave your message in the chat.
Okay.
Sharona, you're muted. You have to unmute.
Okay. One technical detail. In the last half hour, I could not find my cat in order to lock her. So it could be that in the next hour, there'll be a cat on my keyboard. I hope not. I apologize ahead of time.
That's fine.
Okay, so we're going to take a tour of the Israel Museum, and I know you've been there at least once virtually with Julia, and I don't know how many times for real. And this is going to be a very personal tour that I made up, and we're going to have two share screens. Let's see if we can, okay, do you see Google Earth now?
Yes.
Okay, so we're over Jerusalem and we're going to focus over here in this area of Jerusalem, which is where our government and Supreme Court and Parliament buildings are, the three authorities. Showing that this is the capital, because as you know, not the whole world agrees that this is our capital. And very, very close by, just across the street from these three establishments, is the Israel Museum, also showing that this is the capital. Very much like the British and the Louvre and the Smithsonian, the greatest museums, and it's in the top 10. Showing to us and to the world that there's no other place that it could be rather than Jerusalem. So the parliament is up here, and the government buildings are up here, and this complex is the museum. And if you can see, it's built cubes, like a children's toy, with blocks like that. And it was built like that in the 1960s on purpose. The architect already then knew we have the resources now for a small museum, but we are going to make it bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes. And we're going to build it in such a way that you can add more blocks to it, like Lego, and it's going to look harmonious. It's going to look as if it was all built as one. So we're going to go dive into the entrance. We're going to go through the lobby, check our bags, okay, and we're through. Now there's a new entrance today to get to the archaeological department, and that would be going along this corridor where you can go sheltered from the rain or from the sun under here in the shade. And here there's a passage, and then you go into an inside corridor that leads you all the way to the end, to the archaeology, and you go up by escalator and by elevator, and it's very convenient because the distance from the entrance all the way to the archaeology is long, and in the past you had to go with many steps, as we will see very shortly, and either in the sun or in the rain. So now it's fit for extreme weather and for people with disabilities, much more convenient, despite the fact that it's inconvenient since we are in virtual and you're sitting in your air-conditioned house anyway. So we are going to take the long and old way. In the distance we see the shrine of the book with the wall of darkness, which you can also see in my background. And we're going to make our way slowly, as if we're walking up there. We see the sculptures and the work of art on our way. We see the Children and Youth Museum department to our left. And we're going to hop the steps and go all the way to the top till we see the the apple core and go a little closer. And we're going to go in through this entrance over here and reach the same place that we would have reached if we had gone underneath the ground. And here, this is the entrance through the elevator and the escalator. And we're here. And at the entrance of the archaeology department are the anthropoid coffins that were excavated by Moshe Dayan illegally. He was a general at that time. He wasn't an authorized archaeologist. He took all these home. And then after his death, his wife did not donate them to the museum, but sold them for a nice fee. And they're welcoming us into the archaeological history of Israel. And this is a very, very, very long department, beginning with prehistory, beginning with the very, very first signs of humanoids in Israel. We're going to skip all that. And we're going to go fly through the prehistory, and we passed now the Paleolithic and the Neolithic and the Chalcolithic eras, and we're entering the Bronze Age. And our tour today is going to be Bronze and Iron, which is parallel to biblical, Canaanite, and Israelite periods. And we're going down the steps and entering the land of Canaan. And the first thing we see is about the first cities. And more or less the same time is the beginning of history and the beginning of cities and the beginning of Jewish calendar. There's a century or two difference if you take the almost 6,000 years of Jewish calendar to when cities began to appear and civilizations began to appear, and we're not prehistory anymore, we're history. So these are the cities that we are speaking of in the Canaanite period, the major cities. And parallel to what archaeology finds, we have this phrase in the Bible, and Cain, who is another son, the son of Adam and Eve, made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Hanoch. In Hebrew, it's Hanoch. And Cain was then building a city, and he named it after his son Hanoch. So the archaeology and the Bible come together here. And this is what gave me the idea of walking through the museum looking for biblical phrases. So we're going to stop share now the Google Earth and share again with sound my presentation. Okay, do you see it full screen, the presentation?
Yes, yes.
Good. Okay. So what I did here, did it switch?
Yes.
Good. I came back to the same map. What I did is I walked through the museum and I took pictures with my telephone through the glass. So they're not the edge of the art, the best quality photos. And very, very subjectively, I took photos of the object that reminded me of a biblical phrase or a biblical story. Okay? And hopefully you will follow. I'm just saying I am not a rabbi. I am not a Bible scholar. I did not major in Bible. Secular, even atheist tour guide that loves touring with the Bible. So it's very, very subjective and very not systematic, okay? And so we're going to leave that map and continue. Now, the first stories of Genesis are, I hope we all agree, are myths, okay? The creation, the flood, the Tower of Babylon. Obviously, archaeologists could not find anything remotely connected to those. So we begin with the stories of the patriarchs. Now, the way I've done it, in most cases, the photo comes first, and then comes the biblical phrase or story. So if any one of you feels that you know which story is going, are they able to unmute themselves?
Do you want them to be able to unmute themselves?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I would just say if everyone could just be aware if you're muted or unmuted, like only unmute when you want to say something, and then please read.
Exactly. So if you know which story this object is going to hint to, please say. Have you any idea? What is this woman doing? She is preparing dough to make bread. And we're with the patriarchs. We're still in the book of Genesis. Anyone?
Nobody knows.
It's Sarah when you're giving the guess.
Angels. Sarah welcoming the angels.
Exactly. Well, it's Abram welcoming the angels.
Sarah
and he's
making
in the shade with them, and he's telling Sarah to do the work, basically. But quick, okay. Prepare the bread.
Mushivasiu goat.
Yes, exactly. That one. Now, in this little figurine, she's actually standing up next to a table. The table has legs. I doubt it. If Sarah actually had a table, there were nomads. They were walking with their tent from one place to the other. I tend to believe that when she was preparing the dough, she was on her knees. She was on the ground. And also grinding the wheat. You don't take flour with you because flour attracts mice and other rodents. You take the wheat and you grind daily what you need for the consumption of that day. What you grind, you immediately make the dough and you bake. You don't leave it as flour. And the grinding stones were also on the ground. They didn't have usually a table. And skeletons that were found in Israel from the time that the grinding stone was invented, female skeletons have a default in their knees that males don't, because of the domestic daily grinding of the wheat. So this figurine here actually is not representing what women went through. Okay, so Sarah had a difficult life, leaving her family, wandering all the way from Mesopotamia to Canaan. Here they lived on their own, their family. They didn't have relations. In the age of 90, she gets pregnant. I can't think of how difficult that pregnancy must have been. And then she has a fight with her servant. And finally, the kid grows up and the husband takes him to be sacrificed. And then she dies. And what is this? What do we see here? How is this connected to Sarah? This is the one photo I took from somebody. I didn't take the photo myself, so that's why it's black and white. What you see inside this broken jug is the mineral silver. It's like a pound of silver. Right? And when Sarah dies, Abraham cannot just bury her somewhere. He has to buy the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. And at that time, there is no money as we know it today. They haven't invented the coins yet. So he pays them in 400 measurements. That's why the word shekel, from the Hebrew word lishkol, to weigh, measurements of silver. And how amazing is it that this block of silver in this jug was found at Eshtamoa, which is just south of Hebron. Just a coincidence. Now, I'm not saying this is the silver that bought Me'arat Machpelah, but the geography is amazing here, and we will see more such coincidences as we go along. Now, we're going to skip Isaac and Jacob, and we're actually going to skip the whole 400 years in Egypt because we don't have the findings, and nobody really has finding from the Exodus, but this is already on the way back. Okay, again, this was found in Israel, but it reminds me of a story from Exodus. Now this one is easy.
Golden calf.
Golden calf. Okay, so it's a metal calf. Okay, not gold in this case. Okay, and it's Aaron, took from them and cast in the mold and made it into a molten calf. Okay, and this is your God or Israel. This very, very big sin in the desert. Now, why a calf? Because it's one of the most important assets in ancient times. If you have a cow, you can plow your field and you can have food. Okay, it's equal to having a combine, a tractor today. The bulls were not raised for their meat. They hardly ate meat, only in festivals, 2, 3, 4 times a year in a wedding. Okay, and I'm not sure even for the milk of the females. It was mostly for work, for labor. Okay, for plowing the fields, for pulling stones for building. This was the machinery of that time. And therefore, the name, the ancient name for a cow was not shol or pal that we know today. It was called aluf, a champion. And because of this, the aluf, the horns became the letter aleph, the first letter in the alphabet, in the Hebrew alphabet. And of course, it also reminds us later on when the kingdom split between Rechavam and Yerovam, and the king of Israel of the northern kingdom, built 2 more calves in Dan and in Bet El. Okay, very closely to that calf. The calf was while Moses is up on the mountain, 40 days. Okay, and finally he comes back with the 10 commandments. And the second commandment is, do not turn to idols or make molten gods. Now here is a mistake I made. Because in Hebrew, for those of you who can read, Al tifnu el ha'elilim ve'elohei masecha. And when I remember this phrase and I hear the word masecha, I think of a mask. I think of a Purim mask, or a Corona mask, or Venice mask. That's what I think today. And only when I went to the English translation in order to make this presentation, and I find that it doesn't say a mask, it says molten, it means iron. I say, okay, this is not a good translation. Maybe not St. James translation, maybe I'll go to New International Version. And I try that, and it also speaks of, so I had to actually go and search and find out for the first time, thank you presentation, that the word masecha in biblical Hebrew actually means metal, and it doesn't mean what we mean today. So here I gained in the Hebrew language. Okay. Next thing I saw was these little statues, little figurines of donkeys. Now, next to the bull, to the ox, is the most common work animal that people had for smaller chores, for carrying the children, for carrying water, etc., etc. It was very, very, everybody had a donkey. So therefore, we actually have rules about the donkeys, and the books of Exodus and Leviticus are full of rules about how they need to not work on the Sabbath and how you have to be careful with them. They shouldn't hurt people and people shouldn't hurt them. Full of many, many rules. But what story is the most famous story with the donkey? I'm sure you know that.
Bilam and the talking donkey.
Okay.
Bilam. Yeah.
And God opened the ass's mouth. It should be a she-ass. Okay. Female donkey. Okay. And she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times? And Balaam wanted to curse the people in Israel. And thanks to the angel and the donkey, he ended up blessing the people of Israel just before they entered Canaan, towards the end of the journey in the desert. And what land are they going into? They're going to the land of wheat and barley and vines and figs and pomegranates, the land of olive trees and honey. So we have many, many artifacts that have the shape of the pomegranate because it has a crown and it's beautiful and it's majestic. And we have dried figs that remained for all these centuries and millennia. And I put them next to each other, so did the museum, because out of the 7 species, these 2 are mentioned together, with a third one, which is more famous, the spies going into Canaan, coming back with the report. Would it be easy to capture the land or not? They bring the big cluster of grapes, which is the most famous. The 2 people had to carry it together, and some pomegranate and figs, okay, on the side. Now, why do we know the cluster so well? Because any of us who've been on a tour to Israel have seen the emblem of the Ministry of Tourism. That's the old emblem. In these days, we give expression to a variety of people with all kinds of genders and in between, and the emblem has become a little more modern and a little more dancing than spying the land. So these are the first tourists, actually, of Israel. And now we enter the land, and Moses has died in Mount Nebo, and Joshua is a more military commander, and he has to conquer the land. And the greatest obstacle of conquering the land is the city of Chatzor. Chatzor is by far the largest tel, the largest archaeological mound in Israel, and it totally fits the biblical phrase saying that Chatzor was formerly the head of all these kingdoms. The archaeology fits this phrase totally. It is 10 times bigger than Megiddo, Gezer, other Tilim, other sites of that time. So when you walk through the museum, there's this whole room dedicated to Chatzor. It's not one closet, it's not one showcase. It's a big space out of the archaeological exhibit. And these 2 almost life-size lions showing us the power of the city, showing us the power of the kings of the city, welcome us as we enter the room, and everything there is very big. I don't know if you can realize this is about a yard wide. It is an enormous stone ball, and if you look carefully, you see, except for the fact that it's black because it's made out of basalt, it has ash in it. It has remains of a very big fire. And because Chatzor was head of all these kingdoms, Joshua made sure to burn it to the ground. And the Bible tells us that there was no such fire anywhere else. In other places, they let people escape. They saved some animals. They saved some possessions. In Chatzor itself was burned down to the ground, and archaeologists found a very, very thick layer of ash, 13th century BC. It was so hot, it burned for so many days that it melted some of the rocks. The limestone in some spots in Chatzor are melted, okay? And Chatzor, being a big, strong city, also had big temples. And of course, Joshua made sure to destroy these temples. And all these steles were found in secondary use in different places, broken, with their face down, making sure that nothing is left. It totally burned down. And as we said, a thick layer of ash, okay? Most probably, some of these temples were dedicated to the god, the head of the Canaanite pantheon, the god Baal. He has a lightning in his hand, like Zeus, same idea. He brings us the rain. When he comes down and has intercourse with earth, with the rain, then the fruit of the earth, that's the pregnancy, that brings us the wheat. And that is the nemesis of our God all through the biblical period. Pray to me, believe in me. Do not pray to the Baal. Do not sacrifice to the Baal. Do not build altars and stelas to the Baal. So there's so many different phrases, so I didn't choose any one of them. Just tell the story. Okay. So we finally, Joshua conquered the land, and we go to the next books. And the next books, Judges and Samuel, we're not the only ones in the land. The same time that we went in through the east, Joshua with his conquest, another people came in from the west. Those are the Philistines. Okay, so they come from the area of Greece, of Crete, of today. They bring their material culture. And if we look closely at some of these vases, some of these jars, you see that it has like a strain. You see all these holes here, okay? Because these are special jugs for beer. And you put the barley inside, and it ferments inside. And then when you pour, you would like to have just the liquid without what's left of the barley. So here we know that there is a culture of fermenting something which is not wine. And that brings us to the mother of Samson, that during the pregnancy, she must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine or drink wine or other fermented drinks. So the culture was already there. It's not just something that they say. It fits today, okay, because you have all kinds of alcoholic beverages today, but it also fit at that time. The person who wrote that phrase knew that there's wine and there's beer. Now look at these beautiful decorations. We see that it's a material culture that comes from a totally different place, okay? We're still speaking of the Philistines controlling some of the land, and at certain points they controlled the whole industry of iron. You couldn't, we're not even talking about swords and other war elements. We're talking about plows and carriages. Anything that has to do with metal, the people of Israel couldn't do on their own. They had to go to the Philistines, and they had to pay a high price. Now this is a very exciting finding. You have here all these measurements. The basic unit is a shekel, because we said mishkal, lishkol, to weigh, okay? So this is more than a shekel. It's 5 or 10, okay? This is half a shekel, and this is 2/3. And we had no idea what its name was until we actually found it, okay? And on this, if you look carefully, on all of them actually, there's the inscription of the name of the weight, whether it's a pound or 2 pound or a kilo or whatever, in the biblical translation. So each one of these stones actually has the name of the weight on it. And on this one, we found the word pima. And when this was found, it was very exciting, because we can finally understand a biblical phrase that we couldn't understand before. The word pim appears in the Bible only once, okay? The price was a pim for sharpening plow points. The haya mechir pim. And we couldn't understand what was pim until this stone with this inscription was found. And now we know that this is the weight in metal that had to be paid for the service of sharpening the plow points. Okay, continuing with the weights. Okay, the weights are made out of stone. Obviously, that's the basic material that they had, more common. So when we talk about weights in Hebrew, the Zoom is hiding the phrase for me. Okay, we talk about moznei tzedek, avnei tzedek, the scales of justice and the stones of justice. Now, the English doesn't translate it that well, or at least the translation that I used just balances, just weight. It uses the word weights instead of the word stones. Whoever translated understood this is the function. Okay, the Hebrew tells us the material, and the English tells us the function. And it's nice to see when you find these weights made out of stone that whoever wrote the phrase knew the elements, knew the instruments. Okay, still with the Philistines. Okay, although this was found in Lachish from the Iron Age. Okay, what does this remind us? Again, having to do with the Philistines. The most famous Philistine.
Goliath. But David
Goliath.
Yeah.
Okay, the Bible gives us a long description of how he is prepared for war. What is his equipment? Okay, with a bronze helmet on his head and the breastplate with scale armor. Okay, which brings us to King David, to the time of King David. Another amazing finding that was found in Ekron is this inscription. We don't know much about the Philistine culture because they hardly left us anything in writing. We have their material culture and hardly anything written. But the little bit that we have written mentions, for instance, a king named Achish, who is also mentioned in the Bible, because when David was not king yet, and he was pursued by Shaul, and he had to escape, and he was wandering from one place to the other in Judea, and he had to escape to the desert, and finally he couldn't take the desert anymore, so he had to go out of Judea and into the land of the Philistines and find refuge at the hospitality of the king of Ekron, King Achish. So once again, the archaeology and the Bible just come together perfectly. Okay, so King David went to King Achish of Gath. Okay, and when we think of King David, we think of music and we think of psalms. And the Bible gives us something like 34 different names of musical instruments. Some are easy to understand, like drums, tof, and the Bible calls metziltaim, cymbals, and chatzotzra, which today we call a trumpet, it's some kind of a horn. Maybe even this could be a chatzotzra, a horn, and all kinds of flutes. So we find the instruments themselves and figurines playing, and this was found in Ashdod. It's a ritual stand, and I took 3 pictures of it from 3 different angles and direction. It actually turns around. It's one of the only artifacts that the museum made sure that we see from all directions. It's the stand turns around, so we can see that there's a whole party here. Each one of them is playing something else. So if we go back to Samson that we heard of before, we know that he had a wedding ceremony with a lot of beer and a lot of music, so it fits. But going back to King David, we know that he liked music as well, and together with the music, dancing. And the most famous music and dance of King David is when he brings the tabernacle, and when he brings the 10 commandments from Kiryat Yearim to Jerusalem. And he's so excited in his dancing. He goes wild with his dancing, with all his might. And this statue just called out this biblical phrase here, that when his wife, the daughter of Shaul, when Michal sees him approaching towards the palace in Jerusalem, she looks out the window, and what does she do? What does she think? What does she say? Anyone? She mocks
It's not proper.
She laughs at him. What are you dancing with the low people, with the ordinary people? And she despised him in her heart. Okay, and here we have a description of a woman looking out the window. And we have this beautiful stone sculpture from Samaria of a woman looking out the window. And she's not the only woman in the Bible that looks out the window. We have two more, one previous to her and one after her. Okay, the mother of Sisera from the book of Judges. This is from the Battle of Devorah in the north of Israel. And Jezebel, the wife of Ahab, next to at her palace in Israel before she is thrown out that window to her death. So these three proud women looking out the window, and it's a motif that repeats itself to the fact that this artifact that we found in Samaria, similar artifacts were found in Syria and in Iraq of today. This is from Nimrod in Iraq of today. And if you notice, the one from Nimrod, it's a little more complete. It's a little more intact. And you see these little pillars here, which similar to them were found at Ramat Rachel. So it's kind of a window railing or window sill that you can lean and look out the window in safety that you don't fall down. And look how beautiful it is. Totally fit for a woman to look out, to see the world from inside the house, but in such beauty. And these little pillars remind us of the bigger pillars. Anybody who visited Ramat Rachel, Megiddo, of course, anybody who held a 5 shekel coin in his pocket knows this form. And this was the style during the Iron Age. Now, we did not invent it. We came for 400 years in Egypt, and then we wandered in the desert for 40 years, and we didn't have any architectural heritage, any architectural tradition. So when we come to build the temple in Jerusalem or a palace for the king, we need to import builders and masons that already have a heritage. So David and after him Solomon, have very good relationships with Hiram, the king of Tyre, the king of the Phoenicians, and they send cedar trees and carpenters and masons, and they build the house of David. So some of these were also found in the city of David in Jerusalem, the proto-Aeoli capitals that are so significant to the architecture in Israel. So it begins with King David and it continues with Solomon. And the Bible tells us that he built all the places in Jerusalem, his own house in the Milah, and Chatzor and Megiddo and Gezel. So this gate here is from the same room we saw before with those majestic lions. This is a model of a smaller in size model of the gate of the city of Chatzor. I'm sure all of you have heard the story. Anybody who has excavated in Israel knows the story, how during the British Mandate, they excavated Gezer and they found a gate. And then in the early 60s, when they excavated Megiddo, they found a gate. And then Yadin said, let's measure this gate and compare it to the one in Gezer. And lo and behold, they're identical in size. And then when he reaches Chatzor, he marks on the ground with ropes. You have to dig here and here and here, and this is going to be the pillar, and this is going to be the opening, and this is going to be the next pillar, and here's going to be a room, and here's going to be a passage. And exactly where he marked, they went down and they found it. And the one in Chatzor is identical to Gezer and Megiddo. And for Yadin, that was a proof that this biblical sentence is absolutely accurate, and these 3 gates were built by Solomon. Today, most archaeologists agree that they were built by maybe the same contractor, but about 100 years after Solomon, maybe in the time of King Ahab. But the name Solomon Gate, Sha'ar Shlomo, still remains in some of the old books and the old brochures. Anyone have a guess? This one is a difficult one. Letting you guess just gives me time to drink. It's better than... Okay, so Solomon builds the cities, builds his palace, builds the temple. There are artifacts in the temple. You have to sacrifice. And there are all kinds of altars. There's the very, very big one built out of stone. There are also portable, smaller altars. Okay? And these altars have brass bases. And there's this long description of having borders and having images of lions and oxen and keruvim in Hebrew, cherubim. This was found in Megiddo. It has people. It doesn't have the animals. A similar one, a base of an altar, was found in Cyprus. And it's in the same area in the Israel Museum. It's an artifact on loan to show us how the one that was found in Cyprus fits the biblical description. Look at the animals here. And the biblical descriptions continues with the wheels and the axes. And you can actually imagine the sacrifice going up here in this bowl, and you can imagine moving it from one place to the other according to convenience. I made this presentation about 2 years ago, beginning of Corona. And then about 4 months ago, we went to Sinai. And there, at the porch of the hotel, I saw this. So some things don't change. Okay, the portable grill for the meat, for the smoke to come up. I think it looks very, very similar. Okay, going on. We're deep into history already. We're in Iron Age. We're past Solomon, or almost past Solomon. At this point, other countries, other kingdoms around us already refer in their historical documents to Israel, and we can really see places where the Bible and general history come together in some cases, some not. And Solomon builds the temple of God in Jerusalem. And a document that appears 300 years after Solomon, 500 years after Solomon, from Arad, from the very, very end of the kingdom, actually tells us of the house of Yahweh, the house of the Lord. So we know that it's not just in the text that may have been written at that time or centuries later. The people at that time of the kingdom of Judea called the temple in Jerusalem the house of Yahweh. That was the name of the central temple. Remember, in Arad, where this was found, they also had a local temple of their own, which was quite amazing when it was found. This one is more difficult to me. I believe the archaeologists. Obviously, it is a major finding and important and impressive enough to be exhibited in the Israel Museum. I just can't see the writing. This is supposed to be the very first time that we find the name Jerusalem in writing, and not only the name Jerusalem, but in connection to Yahweh. This is what's written here in Hebrew. Adonai Elohei kol haaretz, harei Yehuda, Yahed, lo leElohei Yerushalayim. So these are the letters in Hebrew that are written there. Adonai Elohei kol haaretz, harei Yehuda, lo leElohei Yerushalayim. Without the vowels, of course, because we don't have the vowels. So this is the translation. He's the God of the whole earth. That goes according to Genesis. Made the whole universe. But specifically, the mountains of Judah belong to him, to the God of Jerusalem. Now that's it doesn't fit the Jewish thought as we know it today. Because our God is not territorial. Yes, he has a house because a house is needed. People need a place for ritual. The people need it more than God himself. But he's God of the universe. Territorial gods is something that belongs to the peoples around us, the pagans. They have battles between the gods, and when one god's people lose a war, so they have to take upon themselves the faith of a god of a different territory. So we're talking here maybe of some kind of mid situation between paganism and total monotheism as we would desire it to be today, and it makes sense. It's a very big revolution from going from having a whole family of with statues that you can touch and talk to and feed to something universal and invisible. That's a very, very big change of mind, and probably had some mid stages along the way. So this shows it. And I'm just so sorry that I looked at this for hours and I couldn't find the inscription. If anybody of you sees it, that would be amazing. I believe the archaeologist that it's here. Going on, still with King Solomon. He was a great king in the beginning. And he built the temple, and he was the smartest, and he had judgment, you know, and the story with the two women and the baby and the Queen of Sheba. And it's all sweet and beautiful. It goes sour towards the end. There are two things that he was told not to do, and he did. Now, this is very easy. What was he told not to do, and he did? Sip of iced tea. In Deuteronomy, it says, in the laws of the king, should not acquire great number of horses, okay? And he shall not acquire many, many wives. And we know about Solomon that he had many, many stables and many horses and 1,000 wives, which is basically what brought eventually to the split of the kingdom. Now, once again, the museum put these together in different places. I put them together in one slide. So the kingdom is split, and now we go to the northern kingdom. And the greatest king of the northern kingdom, the king that the Bible loves to hate, if you remember, we had a presentation once, is Elijah. Not Elijah, Achav, of course. So I'm thinking of the next slide already. Achav, and he built his palace, his capital. His father already built the capital in Samaria. And what material is all of this made out of? All of these decorations are made out of what? Anyone?
Ivory.
Ivory. Now, we don't have any elephants in Israel. Somebody had to go to Africa to kill an elephant, to cut the ivory, to go all the way back, and then make these amazing decorations, which tells us that Achav was very, very rich and powerful. Okay, and these are not all the findings. These are just some that I took photos of. And he had so much ivory that the Bible actually tells us that in Hebrew it's called Beit Hashen, Armon Hashen, the palace of ivory. Okay, and the English translate, he built and adorned with ivory. Okay, so once again we see how it fits together. It doesn't mean that everything that is written in the Bible happened exactly like it said, but here and there, when there's this one description, it tells us that the palace has many ivory artifacts. And then we find those ivory artifacts. For me, it is very, very exciting. And these are just absolutely beautiful. And thank God we're not allowed to make many more of those today, at least officially by the UN. And the rival of Achav, as we mentioned before, Eliyahu, the prophet Elijah. Okay? And the prophet Elijah, before he encounters Achav, he takes refuge somewhere in Tzarfat, somewhere north of Israel, and he stays at a widow And because of his curse, there hasn't been rain in the land for the last 3 years. There's a famine, there's drought, there's hardly anything to eat. And when he comes and tells this widow, feed me, she says, I hardly have for myself. And he tells her, don't worry, the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. And we found this jug that says it belongs le-Eliyahu. In the ancient Hebrew, it says that this belongs to Eliyahu. So probably not the jug of this specific phrase. But once again, the coincidence. Okay, it was also not found in Salfat, and Salfat is in Lebanon of today. But the one person that we know of that spoke specifically of a jug, we found a jug with his name. Now, this phrase is so beautiful in Hebrew that it actually got a song, and a military choir sings. So I'm going to take a little break now and enjoy the music. Please thumbs up me if you hear the music, and thumbs down if you don't.
וצפחת השמן לא תחסר עד אשר יבוא מטר על פני האדמה. אשר יבשו הנחלים והמטר פושש לבוא, האיש ההוא חצב את המילים מלבבו. כאן הקמח לא תכלה וצפחת השמן לא תחסר עד אשר יבוא מטר על פני האדמה.
It goes on for 2 more verses. If you like the song, find it on YouTube. Okay, beautiful song. And we're continuing down the lineage, and we're back to Judah. And one of the kings of Judah, Uzziah, okay, had leprosy, and he was buried at the end of his days separate from all the other kings. He had to be separate in his life as well. Okay, and lo and behold, a tomb was found. Now, this door of a tomb actually belongs to a later period. If you notice that the Hebrew inscription is the Hebrew lettering that we know today, the square lettering that we brought from Babylon. It's not the ancient Hebrew that we saw in previous inscriptions. So the door itself and the site itself is from a later period, but still people that held the tradition exactly where King Uzziah is buried, and warned people, of course, not to open his tomb. And this is a very exciting inscription in unicorn. In the book of Isaiah, the king of Assyria named Sargon is mentioned. Now, it's the one only time he is mentioned in the Bible, and he wasn't mentioned anywhere else. And for when archaeological research began, at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, when the empires, France and Germany and England, started excavating in Egypt and Mesopotamia, they were sure that there's a biblical mistake here. They did not know of King Sargon. They did not find in the beginning anything of him. So they thought maybe it's a mispronunciation. Maybe it should be Sancherib, which they did know of, or Shalmaneser, another king. And then, after World War I, they did find in Iraq of today the capital of Sargon. They found a palace. And like many other kings, he had inscriptions of different battles and different victories that he had. And they found his name, Sargon. And in his palace, it is said that one of his victories is against Samaria and against Ashdod. And then in the 1960s, in Ashdod itself, they found these fragments of an stela with the cuneiform writing saying that this is a victory of Sargon against Ashdod. And it was probably a base of a statue or a chair or something, and it was deliberately broken probably in a revolt against Assyria that happened in the time of Hezekiah, the next in line, the next king in line. So it's quite amazing that the one sentence in the Bible where Sargon appears has to do with the Battle of Ashdod, and at Ashdod, at the same site, this stela comes to prove this sentence correct. The next inscription is, of course, very, very, very famous. It was found yet in the Turkish period, in the end of the 19th century, at the Hezekiah tunnel in Jerusalem, the tunnel that saved the city from the Assyrians in the revolt I just mentioned, and let the kingdom of Judea live for 120 more years, which we have to be very thankful for. Because the people of Israel, the 10 tribes, the northern kingdom that were exiled because they didn't have such a tunnel, disappeared. And the extra 120 years that this tunnel gave us made the Jews strong enough in their monotheism that we came back from exile, the people of the tribe of Judah, which we are descendants of. So what does this inscription tell us? This is very exciting. This was written by people of blue collar, okay, not kings. Okay, it's the people who actually carved the tunnel from the spring to the pool. And they're talking about the hammers, and they're talking about the axes, and they're talking about how they can hear each other coming toward each other and finally completing. And they know when they reach each other, the two delegations coming from both sides, that they're saving the kingdom. And it totally fits the biblical phrase that tells us about the pool and the tunnel, which brought the water from the spring and into the city. So this is very, very, very exciting. And all of this was done in the time of the king of Hezekiah, King Hezekiah. And a few years ago, a seal was found with his name. It's a very special seal. It has an Egyptian symbol in it. Egypt was in coalition together with Hezekiah against the Assyrians, and deliberately has his name here, Hezekiah, the king of Judea. So very, very special and unique. There's one of the kind. It's in its own case. It's not the first biblical name that we found in seals. There are about a dozen, maybe more, of all kinds of people, especially from the Book of Kings, when writing was much more common, and there were many clerks and many people who signed letters. I chose to take photo only of this specific one. One of the first one that was found in the city of David in the very late 60s, right after the Six-Day War, after the reunification of Jerusalem in 1967, and it bears the name Gmariyahu ben Shaphan. Why is this more exciting to me than others? Because Gmariyahu ben Shaphan was one of the scribes of Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah, like many other prophets, he spoke a lot, but he didn't write. Other people wrote his prophecies. So Gmariyahu ben Shaphan might be, together with Baruch ben Neriah, one of the people who actually wrote some of the Bible, some of the chapters that we have today. We're coming towards the end of the First Temple period, towards the end of the kingdom. And again, a very exciting site on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. Today it's underneath the Begin Heritage Center, next to the Scottish hotel and church, those of you who are familiar, on Mount Zion. And this amazing tomb cave was found with these 3 shelves, and skeletons were found in them, and every skeleton has room for the head, for the skull. You see this semicircle here and semicircle here, like a little pillow. And the people were buried with a lot of their artifacts and with the clothing that was made out of linen, so it disappeared, and their jewelry. And among the jewelry were 2 small amulets that were like a necklace. So the string, the cord is gone, but the amulet itself was found. It was rolled up like a tiny little cigar, and it took years to open it. It's made out of silver, very famous, very valuable. And this is the very first biblical text from biblical times. We had the name of Yahweh, and we had the name of Jerusalem, and we had all kinds of inscriptions, blue color, but this is a sentence from Numbers. It's the Birkat HaKohanim, the priestly blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you, and the Lord make his face shine to you and give you peace. Ya'er panav elecha ve'iten lecha shalom. And here we have this on this inscription. And it is the earliest biblical script that we have that is totally genuine, that we know when it was written. We're talking about the 6th century BC. And we're really getting to the end. And the prophet of Isaiah is a real good place to end. And these swords, actually from the Bronze Age, were found in burial sites, in tombs of soldiers. Other pieces of equipment that were found next to skeletons tell us that these were soldiers. And this was his personal sword. And since the soldier himself is already dead, and the sword belongs to him, and it's not going to be used for war anymore, it was deliberately bent. And we found these bent swords in several places. One of these bent swords was given by Menachem Begin as a gift to Anwar Sadat after signing the first peace agreement with Egypt. As you see, this picture is not from the Israel Museum, it's from the Egyptian Museum. You see the Arabic explanation here. And again, with this biblical phrase that we shall not train for war anymore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharona. This was so interesting. I've been to that museum, I can't tell you how many times, and I've never thought about all of this. I'm sure most of us are that way. And I feel like most of us didn't answer your questions because we weren't sure if we were right.
What would happen if you gave a wrong answer? What could happen?
Who knows? Who knows? The possibilities are endless. Did they actually give one of these, like a presentation like this at the museum, and this is your take on it? Or have you, because they should, I don't know why they don't. Is this something you could do for them?
Well, first of all, I'm sure they have much better quality photos of the objects.
Well, you would be in the museum, I'm saying, taking people through and giving a tour like this.
They have their own guides.
I know.
Let me tell you something. The salary that the museum gives, it's not worth my while for Saba going to Jerusalem.
I worked in museums for 14 years. I know about the salaries there. But thank you so much. We have some questions for you. But first, I just want to say to everyone, this program is the last one of our programs for season 4. All of next month will be schmoozes. And I think there are 5 Thursdays next month, and they will be schmoozes. And then we'll return back to, I think, 1 week of programming and 3 of schmoozes as our speakers and guides get back to real life and are able to give people in-person tours We can't have them as much as we'd like, but we will continue with our 5th season after September is done. So if we want to take a look at the pictures, you're also all at the chat. You're also welcome to unmute yourself if you have a question.
Can I just show this picture from the British Museum?
Please do.
Yeah, they what's it say?
Here.
Weights from La Leche. Oh, where did it go? Come back here. I lost it. Hold on. Oh, what does it say? Inscribed in hieratic or Hebrew, donating multiples or fractions of shekels. Something the British took before they left.
Mm.
Wow. So, yeah, it was in the British Museum.
Empires were allowed to take everything. Khirbet Betloya is in the Shpela, in the lowlands, in the area of Beit Shemesh. Who was it? Hillel. Okay, I hope I answered that.
Mm-hmm.
Why doesn't the museum show a photo and impose on it the Hebrew letters that you can see? Are you talking about the one with Jerusalem? I have no idea. Maybe it was my problem. Maybe you guys could see it. But that's a good idea. I'll ask them next time I'm there.
What year?
When did the Hebrew lettering? Okay, so we had ancient script, the ancient Hebrew, and then we were exiled to Babylon, and we took upon ourselves letters that were in Babylon, the Ktav Merubah, Ktav Dat, stayed with the same language and brought the letters back. You can compare it, for instance, to Turkish of today. They had their own Turkish lettering, and today they use Latin letters. And many other languages change and are using Latin letters because it was easier to write, probably. What did year? It's not a year. It's coming back from Babylon. Let's see, any questions?
Everyone's just saying how wonderful it was.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to unmute.
Just a comment. I think it's great to have some context put behind the pieces that the museum has to tie it in to the Tanakh. It's really helpful. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. It tells a story. There are there are thousands of artifacts. What I have here is not even the edge of anything. As I said, it was just whatever caught my eye and made me think of something. So probably another tour guide could go through the same and have a totally different presentation if he remembers different stories or has different associations. Okay. So we're almost on time as well. It took an hour.
We are. It was wonderful. Thank you. Oh, Carol's got something to say. I think you know her.
Yeah, I think you do. I just want to say how much we have now enjoyed you, have always enjoyed you. I'm amazed by the depth of your knowledge every time I hear you. And she happens to be Barry's cousin. So I'm doubly, triply proud.
I'm waiting for you. What is it? October, November? When do I see you?
End of October. We'll be on the
End of
dig.
October.
Yeah.
Delighted.
David, sorry, Carol, keep going.
Assuming we can get the bodies to move. So
You better be here.
we will be.
David, I see you have your hand raised. Did you have a question? No? Oh, he pushed it by accident. Never mind, David. Just no one look at David. He doesn't have a question.
Accident.
There's another question there. Esther.
Do you have a question? Before
In the
we
chat.
Another question from Esther.
What's the connection? Beit, the Aleph, and the bull?
And the bull. The bull in biblical terms was called aluf. They did not use always the word shor or par that we use in Hebrew today. Also in Egyptian, the word for bull was aluf. And from the word aluf comes aleph. And aluf today in modern Hebrew means a champion. So it connects. It's a matter of power. It's a matter of might.
Hmm.
And okay, the shape, okay, the aleph today, not the square aleph, but the script has like two horns. They're on the side, but the ancient Hebrew had the horns on top.
Wow.
Okay, the letters are not only changed, some of them rotated. Now, if you look carefully, basically the A in English and the alpha from the Greek come from the same horns. They just turned around and the bull's head is upside down at the moment.
That would be an interesting.
The two legs of the A are actually the horns of the bull.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Carol in the depths of your knowledge. I wouldn't have thought of half of this or a quarter of it. If no one else has questions, we can let John go to bed. Does somebody, Barry, is that you?
Yeah, this probably has no relevance, but years ago I was at Megiddo and we were going around looking at the stables and what have you. And we went down into a deep, deep well, went very down into the bottom. And later on, I read something about the source, and it had some biblical history that I've never been able to find out the source, what that well was relevant to biblically.
Yeah, it's not a well. The water system, you have several Iron Age sites that have such water systems. You have in Beersheba, and you have in Chatzor, and in Gezer, and other sites that initially there was a spring of water and people settled next to it. Now, along generations, a mound was created to a point that the people living on the top of the mound were far away from the original spring that they settled centuries before. Now, as long as there are peace, there's no problem. You walk down to the spring of water and you fetch water and you bring back up the vase. The problem is during times of war, because the source of water is actually outside the town. So what they did in many cases, they made the water flow in a tunnel to the inside of the town. You dig a shaft and then a tunnel that brings you, and then you hide the water source from the outside. So that's what they did in Megiddo. They diverted the springs so it runs inside, and when you went down this amazing shaft, so it's 80 steps going down or 180 steps going down. Okay. Now there is a book called The Source, which is this thick, and unfortunately, it's not translated to Hebrew, so I never got through it all. But each chapter of it tells us of a different period in time of an imaginary tell. But this imaginary tell is inspired by real tells that exist. So there's a chapter there about the water engineer that his name is Hupu. That chapter I actually read. That he digs all the way down until he finds the water and brings the water inside. Yeah.
If you haven't read the book,
Thank you.
You should.
I read about a quarter of it.
No, yeah, I know you can't, but if anyone else hasn't read it, it's my favorite. You should. It's worth how thick it is.
The author is James Michener.
Michener, right?
Yes.
Took me 20 years to read it, but it was worth every year.
And right through it.
I need to go back to it. You should make a movie.
They should make a movie. It's actually a great idea. Okay.
Okay, guys.
Thank you so much, Sharona, for the 4th time. Thank you. Thank you.
Tell Julia.
I will. I will.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.